The transport shuddered as it descended through the atmosphere of Vareth Prime, and I gripped the armrest hard enough to leave dents in the composite metal. My diplomatic credentials meant nothing if the planetary defense grid decided I was a threat. 3 escort ships flanked us, their weapons hot, their pilots silent. One wrong move and we'd become vapor before I could explain that Earth's coalition had sent me here to prevent a war, not start one. Ambassador Reeves. My pilot's voice crackled through the calm. They're demanding you exit alone. No security detail. No weapons. I'd expected that. The Vareth didn't trust easily, and humanity had given them every reason to be suspicious. 6 months ago, one of our mining corporations had violated their sacred territory. The incident killed 3 of their people. The corporation claimed it was an accident. The Vareth claimed it was genocide. Now I had one chance to stop both species from turning the disputed border into a killing field. The landing platform materialized through the purple haze of Vareth's twin suns. Massive. Empty. Designed to make visitors feel small. I stepped out into air that tasted like copper and ozone, and the escort ships peeled away, leaving me exposed under a sky that churned with colors I had no names for. The silence pressed against my eardrums. Then, she emerged from the palace entrance, and every piece of intelligence I'd studied became worthless. Queen Suresh wasn't just tall, she was a monument of controlled power, her exoskeleton gleaming like polished obsidian, her 4 arms moving with the precision of a trained killer. The crown embedded in her skull wasn't decorative, it pulsed with bioluminescence that I knew marked her as the living embodiment of Vareth law. Behind her came the royal guard, 15 warriors whose presence screamed readiness for violence. She stopped 3 meters away. Close enough to strike. Far enough to evaluate. Ambassador Reeves. Her voice resonated through both air and, something deeper, a frequency I felt in my chest. Your species murdered my people. You violated sacred ground. You have 60 seconds to convince me why I should not declare war before the sun set tonight. No pleasantries. No diplomatic protocol. Just raw, burning rage wrapped in imperial composure. I'd prepared 3 speeches. Political language. Careful apologies. Economic incentives. But looking into her multifaceted eyes, eyes that held generations of genetic memory, that had watched her people suffer at humanity's carelessness, I abandoned every word I'd rehearsed. I can't, I said. The guards' hands moved to their weapons. Queen Suresh went utterly still, which somehow felt more dangerous than movement. Explain. I can't convince you we don't deserve your rage. We do. The corporation that violated your territory prioritized profit over life. They killed your people through negligence that looked exactly like malice. I can't stand here and ask you to forgive us when I wouldn't forgive us if I were you. Then, you've wasted your journey, Ambassador. No. I took 1 step forward, and a dozen weapons hummed to life. I stopped. I'm here to offer you something more valuable than excuses. I'm here to offer you justice. Something shifted in her posture. Not softening. Sharpening. Explain. Quickly. The Earth Coalition authorized me to transfer full legal custody of every executive responsible for the violation. Their assets are frozen. Their families are barred from corporate inheritance. When you declare them guilty, not if, when we will enforce any sentence you impose, including execution. I have the extradition warrants in my diplomatic pouch. The guards looked at each other. Queen Suresh's crown pulsed brighter. You would surrender your own people to alien justice. They're not my people. They're criminals who wore human faces while they destroyed everything we claim to value. I met her eyes and didn't blink. My species has a choice. We can protect the guilty and prove we're exactly the monsters you believe we are, or we can prove that human justice means something by letting you execute it. The silence stretched so long I heard my own heartbeat hammering. Queen Suresh moved closer, her height forcing me to crane my neck back. One of her hands could crush my skull. She knew it. I knew it. Everyone on that platform knew it. "You're either the bravest human I've encountered," she said softly, "or the most foolish. I'm just tired of watching powerful people escape consequences while innocent people pay the price." She studied me for another eternal moment, then gestured to her guard. They lowered their weapons but didn't holster them. "You will accompany me to the palace. We will review your warrants. If they are legitimate, we will discuss terms." She turned, then paused. "If they are not, Ambassador, you will join the accused in the execution chamber." "Understood." As I followed her toward the palace entrance, my hands steady despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just passed one test only to face something far more dangerous waiting inside those walls. The palace interior consumed light rather than reflected it. Vareth architecture wasn't built for comfort. It was built to remind everyone who entered that they existed at the pleasure of those in power. My footsteps echoed too loudly against floors that felt like walking on compressed starlight. Queen Suresh moved in absolute silence. We entered a chamber that could have held 1,000 people but contained only one, a young Vareth female positioned near a window overlooking the city. She turned as we approached, and I understood immediately why every piece of intelligence about the Vareth royal family had included warnings about Princess Kelith. She was smaller than her mother, her exoskeleton still carrying the softer edges of youth, but her eyes held something I'd seen before in soldiers who'd survived battles they should have died in. Awareness. The kind that comes from understanding exactly how fragile life is. "Mother." Kelith's voice lacked her mother's resonance but carried a precision that felt sharper. "Is this the human who brought the warrants?" "Yes." "Ambassador Reeves, my daughter, Princess Kelith, third of the crown succession and keeper of territorial justice." The title made me pause. Territorial justice. That meant she'd been responsible for investigating the incident. She'd probably seen the bodies. Kelith approached me with movements too controlled to be casual. "I reviewed Earth's initial response to the violation. Political apologies. Financial compensation. Promises of better oversight." She stopped close enough that I could see the fine patterns etched into her exoskeleton. "Empty words designed to protect the guilty." "Yes," I agreed. That surprised her. "Good. You don't defend your government's position?" "I can't. I was in the coalition chambers when they drafted that response." "A man worth more than some planetary economies." "Was worth," I corrected. "His assets are frozen pending your verdict. His family can keep what they earned legitimately. Everything gained from the violation is forfeit." Kelith looked up from the documents. "You're destroying a corporate dynasty to satisfy alien justice. I'm destroying a criminal enterprise that used human faces to commit murder." Something passed between mother and daughter in a glance I couldn't fully read. Queen Suresh gestured toward a seating area that looked designed for Vareth physiology. I sat awkwardly on a bench that forced my knees up, making me feel even smaller than I already did. "Your coalition authorized this?" Queen Suresh asked. 3 votes in favor, 2 against. It passed by the minimum margin. "What happens to your career when you return?" "Depends on whether this works. If it does, I'm a hero. If it fails, I'm a traitor who handed humans over to aliens without a fair trial." "You're risking everything. People already died because we did nothing. I'd rather risk my career than watch that happen again." Kelith set down the documents and moved to the window. Her voice came quieter, more personal. "I was first responder to the violation site. Our protocols required royal presence to verify sacred ground desecration." She touched the window, her fingers leaving faint marks on the crystal. "I found them still alive. All 3. Trapped in collapsed mining equipment. They knew they were dying. They used their final words to forgive the humans who killed them." My throat tightened. "They forgave because our culture teaches that rage against the ignorant achieves nothing. They died believing humans simply didn't understand what they'd destroyed." Kelith turned back to me. "They were wrong. Your corporation knew. The survey data proves they knew. They just didn't care." "I know," I said. "I read the full report. Then, you understand why forgiveness is impossible. I do. Queen Suresh stood, her full height making the chamber feel smaller. Ambassador Reeves, your warrants are legitimate. Your authority is verified. We will accept custody of the accused and proceed with trial under Vareth law. She paused, and I felt the weight of what came next before she spoke. But there is a complication. Of course there was. Vareth law requires that any punishment imposed on outsiders must be witnessed and accepted by a designated representative of the people. Someone who understands our justice and agrees to accept the outcome as legitimate. Her crown pulsed brighter. That representative must remain on Vareth Prime for the duration of the trial. Which could take months. I'll stay. You haven't heard the complication. Doesn't matter. If my presence makes this work, I'll stay. Keleth made a sound I couldn't interpret. Queen Suresh's expression remained unreadable. The complication, Ambassador, is that Vareth law also requires the representative to participate in daily court proceedings, to witness evidence, to understand context, to live among us and learn our ways so that justice is informed, not arbitrary. She moved closer, her presence overwhelming. And during that time, as the designated representative, you would be bound to my household. Under my protection. Subject to my rules. I understand. I don't think you do. Queen Suresh's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. You would be exposed to aspects of Vareth culture that outsiders never see. You would witness rituals, ceremonies, and customs that we guard jealously. You would become, temporarily, almost Vareth in the eyes of our law. Then I'll become almost Vareth. Princess Keleth laughed, a sharp, chittering sound that held genuine surprise. Mother, he doesn't hesitate. No. Queen Suresh agreed, studying me with an intensity that felt invasive. He doesn't. She extended one hand, the formal gesture of acceptance I'd studied in preparation. I gripped her hand, her exoskeleton smooth and warm against my skin, and felt the weight of commitment settle over me like gravity. The trial began 3 days later in a courtroom that had never held a human before. The Vareth legal system didn't believe in juries. Instead, a council of 7 judges reviewed evidence while the accused stood in a containment field that prevented interference. I sat in a designated section marked for official witnesses, surrounded by Vareth citizens who watched me as intently as they watched the proceedings. The CEO of Meridian Resources, Marcus Hale, stood in the field wearing the expression of a man who couldn't believe his empire had abandoned him. 2 other executives flanked him, their lawyers conspicuously absent. Earth had provided legal representation in the form of briefing documents, but Vareth law didn't allow advocates to speak on behalf of the accused. You defended yourself, or remained silent. The accused will acknowledge the charges, the lead judge announced. Hale's voice came through the translation system, stripped of bass but carrying his arrogance intact. I acknowledge that an accident occurred. I deny criminal intent. Meridian Resources followed all known protocols for operating in disputed territory. Princess Keleth stood as the primary prosecutor, her role as keeper of territorial justice making her the natural choice. She moved to the evidence display and activated a holographic projection. Disputed territory, she repeated. An interesting phrase. Let me show you what the accused calls disputed. The hologram showed a 3-dimensional map of the violated region. Then, Keleth overlaid historical data, and the chamber went silent. The sacred site appeared in brilliant color, marked, documented, and registered in 18 different galactic databases going back 400 years. This site has been recognized as Vareth's sacred ground since before your species achieved faster-than-light travel, Keleth said. It appears in every standard navigation database. It's marked on every territorial map. It's protected under 6 different interstellar treaties. She turned to face Hale directly. Your own company's survey team flagged it as protected territory in their initial report. Hale's expression cracked. That's impossible. Keleth produced another document. Survey report, Meridian Resources Expedition 774. filed 14 months before the violation. Quote, Site Delta 9 shows significant cultural markers consistent with Vareth's sacred designation. Recommend avoiding this sector entirely. Signed by your chief surveyor, Elena Vargas. I never saw that report. No. Because you deleted it. Keleth activated another display. This is the data recovery from your personal system. Performed by human forensic experts using human technology. Verified by Earth Coalition investigators. The screen filled with communication logs. You received the report. You read it. And then you ordered your team to proceed anyway because the mineral deposits were too valuable to abandon. The chamber erupted in chittering that I'd learned to recognize as Vareth outrage. The judges called for silence, but the damage was done. Hale had just been proven a liar using his own deleted files. I watched the rest of the day's proceedings with growing certainty that these men would die. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was overwhelming. Keleth presented testimony from the families of the dead. She showed medical scans of their final hours. She played audio recordings of them forgiving their killers while trapped in the rubble. By the time the court adjourned, Hale's 2 executives had stopped trying to defend themselves. I returned to the palace exhausted, emotionally wrung out from watching justice grind forward with mechanical precision. A servant met me at the entrance, a young Vareth male whose role I still didn't fully understand. The Queen requests your presence in the private wing, he said. I followed him through corridors I hadn't seen before, deeper into the palace where the architecture shifted from imposing to almost comfortable. We stopped at a door that opened into a room I recognized as a family dining area, sized for Vareth but adapted with human furniture in one corner. Queen Suresh sat at the table with Princess Keleth, both of them eating something that smelled faintly like charred fruit. They looked up as I entered. Ambassador Reeves. Queen Suresh gestured to the human chair. You've witnessed your first day of Vareth justice. Sit. Eat. We have much to discuss. I sat, accepting a plate of food that had been prepared by someone who'd clearly researched human dietary needs. The gesture surprised me more than it should have. You performed well, Keleth said. You didn't react emotionally when evidence was presented. You didn't try to defend the accused. You simply witnessed. That was my role. Yes. But many species struggle with it. They feel compelled to intervene, to argue, to protest. Queen Suresh ate with precise movements of her multiple hands. You accepted that Vareth justice operates by Vareth rules. Accepting jurisdiction was the whole point. Acceptance and understanding are different things. Queen Suresh set down her utensils. Tell me, Ambassador. Do you believe the accused deserve to die? The question felt like a trap, but I answered honestly. I believe they knew what they were doing. They chose profit over lives. They deleted evidence and proceeded with full knowledge that they'd violate sacred ground. I paused. Under human law, that's premeditated negligent homicide. Under any moral framework I recognize, that's murder. But do they deserve to die? I don't know. I'm not sure I'm qualified to make that determination. Keleth leaned forward. You're human. They're human. You share culture, biology, history. If you can't determine what they deserve, who can? You can. You're the ones they wrong. And if we choose execution? Then I'll witness it and report to my government that justice was served. Queen Suresh and Keleth exchanged another one of those glances I couldn't fully read. The Queen stood, moving to a window that overlooked gardens I'd glimpsed earlier. There's something you should understand about Vareth culture, Ambassador. We don't execute criminals to satisfy rage. We execute them to prevent contamination. She turned back to me. We believe that those who willfully destroy sacred life become carriers of a spiritual disease. If they live, that disease spreads through contact, through influence, through the simple fact of their continued existence. Execution is amputation. Necessary and clean. The concept made me deeply uncomfortable, but I kept my expression neutral. Your human ethics would call this barbaric. Queen Suresh continued. My human ethics would call any execution complex. But I'm not here to judge your beliefs. I'm here to ensure my species honors its commitment to your jurisdiction. Even if we execute them publicly? As ceremony and warning? My stomach turned, but I nodded. Even then. Keleth made that chittering laugh again. Mother, I like this human. He doesn't flinch. No, Queen Suresh agreed. He doesn't. She returned to the table and sat, her posture shifting into something less formal. Ambassador, I must ask you a question, and I require complete honesty. All right. Do you desire my daughter? The question hit me like a physical blow. I stared at Queen Suresh, certain I'd misheard. Keleth had gone absolutely still. What? It's a simple question. Do you desire Princess Keleth? My mind raced through every possible interpretation, every diplomatic implication, every potential trap. Your Majesty, I don't understand what you're asking. Yes, you do. You're simply trying to determine the safe answer. Queen Suresh's crown pulsed with that same dangerous brightness. I'm asking if you find my daughter attractive. If you desire her company, her presence, her attention. I'm asking if you wish to pursue a relationship with the heir to the Vareth throne. I looked at Keleth, whose expression remained carefully neutral, then, back to Queen Suresh. With respect, Your Majesty, we're different species. I've been here less than a week. Any answer I give would be premature at best, and disingenuous at worst. That's not an answer. Because it's not a question I can answer honestly without more context about what you're actually asking. Queen Suresh leaned back, and I saw something that might have been approval in her posture. Most humans would have said no immediately. Politely. Diplomatically. Lying to avoid offense. I don't lie well enough to fool you. No. You don't. She stood again, this time gesturing for me to follow. Come. There's something you need to see. We walked deeper into the private wing, Keleth following silently behind us, until we reached a chamber that felt like a combination of library and war room. Star maps covered the walls. Documents filled every surface. And in the center sat a holographic display showing something that made my blood run cold. Fleet positions. Human and Vareth. Hundreds of ships on each side, positioned along the disputed border like chess pieces waiting for someone to make the first move. This is the current tactical situation, Queen Suresh said. 3 human battle groups. 5 Vareth defensive fleets. Enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. She manipulated the display, and the projection zoomed in on specific areas. Here. Here. And here. Flashpoints where minor incidents have already occurred. Weapons fire exchanged. Shields tested. No deaths yet, but that's just luck and restraint running on fumes. I studied the display, recognizing the configurations. The coalition is preparing for war. So are we. The trial will determine if that war happens. Queen Suresh turned to face me fully. If the accused are executed, some humans will call it murder. They'll demand retaliation. They'll say we're barbarians who killed humans for following human business practices in disputed territory. Some will. Not all. Enough. Enough to provide political cover for military action. Her crown pulsed brighter. But if there was a human voice, a respected voice, a credible voice, arguing that justice was served fairly, that execution was warranted and legitimate, then the Hawks lose their simplest argument. Understanding crashed over me. You need me to validate the execution publicly. More than that. I need you to become the bridge between our species. The proof that humans and Vareth can coexist, can understand each other, can build something beyond mutual tolerance. She gestured to her daughter. And that's where Keleth becomes relevant. Keleth spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room. Vareth culture places enormous significance on personal bonds. Family ties. Romantic partnerships. If a human and a Vareth could form a genuine relationship, it would demonstrate compatibility at the deepest level. You want me to date your daughter for political reasons? No, Queen Suresh said firmly. I want you to date my daughter because she's brilliant, capable, and worthy of consideration. The political benefits would be secondary. I looked at Kelith, really looked at her. She met my gaze without flinching, her multifaceted eyes reflecting light and patterns I'd started to recognize as emotional tells. And what does Princess Kelith want? Kelith approached until we stood close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her exoskeleton. I want someone who doesn't treat me like a political asset. Someone who sees past my title and my species. Someone who can stand in a room with my mother and give honest answers even when they're uncomfortable. She paused. I want to know if that human exists. If you're that human. I don't know if I am. That's the first honest thing you've said since Mother asked the question. Queen Suresh moved to stand beside her daughter. So I ask again, Ambassador. Do you desire my daughter? I took a breath, weighing every word. I desire to know her better. I desire to understand if the connection I feel when we argue about justice and politics could become something deeper. I desire honesty over diplomacy and truth over tactical advantage. I met Queen Suresh's eyes. But I won't pursue your daughter as a political strategy. Either this is real or it's nothing. The silence stretched. Then, Queen Suresh did something I'd never seen a Varith do. She smiled. Not with her mouth. Varith physiology didn't work that way. But her crown dimmed to a soft, warm glow, and her posture relaxed into something I'd learned to recognize as approval. You shattered my pride, Ambassador. I expected you to lie, to deflect, to play the political game I set up. Instead, you gave me the one answer I couldn't manipulate. She placed one hand on her daughter's shoulder. Kelith, he's yours to pursue or dismiss as you choose. I won't interfere. Kelith's crown pulsed in a pattern I'd never seen before, something fast and bright and almost nervous. Mother, you're terrible at subtlety. I'm a queen. Subtlety is for those who need it. They left me alone in the war room, surrounded by fleet positions and tactical data, my mind spinning from a conversation that had just changed everything. I stared at the holographic display, watching human and Varith ships drift in their holding patterns, and wondered if I'd just agreed to something far more dangerous than witnessing executions. Behind me, the door opened. Kelith returned, alone this time. Walk with me, she said. We walked through palace gardens that existed under a dome engineered to filter the twin suns into something approximating twilight. Plants I had no names for grew in geometric patterns that suggested order and chaos in equal measure. Kelith moved beside me in silence for several minutes before speaking. My mother isn't subtle, but she's not wrong either. We're sitting on the edge of war. The trial could tip us either direction. She stopped beside a fountain that cycled water in defiance of gravity. I've spent 6 months investigating the violation. 6 months staring at evidence of human cruelty and human carelessness. I started to believe your species was fundamentally incompatible with ours. And now? Now I've met you. Now I've watched you refuse to defend the indefensible. Now I've seen you commit to consequences even when they might destroy your career. She turned to face me. You're not like the humans who killed our people. I'm exactly like them. Same species. Same cultural background. Same capacity for violence and negligence. But not the same choices. Not yet. But I'm one bad decision away from becoming them. Kelith's crown pulsed that nervous pattern again. Do you know what I find attractive about humans? No. You're soft. Fragile. You have no exoskeleton, no natural defenses, no biological weapons. You're born vulnerable and you stay vulnerable your entire lives. She reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and touched my arm with one hand. Her fingers were warm through my shirt. And yet you came here alone. You stood before my mother knowing she could kill you. You committed to witnessing executions that might trigger a war. You did all of that while being soft and fragile and completely unprotected. That's not attractive. That's just stupid. It's brave. It's the kind of courage that doesn't rely on physical power. It's choosing to be vulnerable and proceeding anyway. Her hand lingered on my arm. I find that incredibly attractive. I should have said something diplomatic. Something careful. Instead, I said, I find you terrifying. Kelith laughed, that real, chittering sound. Good. You should. But I also find you fascinating. The way you prosecuted today. The precision. The way you let evidence speak instead of grandstanding. You didn't try to humiliate the accused. You just presented truth and let it destroy them. That's Verith justice. We don't believe in performance. It's beautiful. Harsh but beautiful. We stood there in the garden while the filtered light shifted towards something like dusk. Kelith's hand remained on my arm, and I became acutely aware of how close we stood, how much taller she was, how her crown reflected in the fountain water like captured stars. I should tell you something, Kelith said quietly. If we pursue this, whatever this becomes, it won't be easy. My people will see it as either political theater or betrayal of species purity. Your people will see it as you being seduced by aliens. We'll face resistance from every direction. I know. And if the trial goes badly, if war happens despite everything, we'll be on opposite sides of a conflict that could kill billions. I know that too. And you're still interested? I thought about lying. About finding a polite way to retreat. Instead, I turned my hand and linked my fingers with hers, an awkward gesture given her anatomy, but she adjusted, and somehow we made it work. I'm terrified, I admitted. But yes, I'm interested. Kelith's crown blazed bright, and I realized I just made her happy. The knowledge felt more significant than any diplomatic victory. We walked back toward the palace together, hands linked, while above us the twin suns finally set and the sky filled with stars that belonged to either of our species but to the vast, complicated universe we'd have to learn to share. Inside the war room, the fleet positions remained unchanged. But something fundamental had shifted. Two people from different worlds had chosen connection over fear. It wasn't much. It might not be enough. But it was a start. The next morning, the trial resumed with renewed intensity, and I understood that my relationship with Kelith, whatever it became, would be tested by fire and blood before either of us knew if it could survive.